This morning, me and my little cousin finished up the last floor to park that last camera on the shed. And this is the end result. I'm just going to speed it up because it's a long video. We just put boards where the cameras were. He can't put any cameras in the middle because of the trees he has. And I'm just showing you how the back of the boards look. And the solar panel lights that we bought. And this is how it looks at night. She did add lights to the boards, but she didn't buy enough. So she's going back in the morning to finish and hang them. But they're going to look exactly alike, so I didn't feel the need to, wait until tomorrow to show you guys how it looks. And of course, we didn't build tall enough for their chimney cameras, so we bought floodlights. Yeah, let me show you. Boom, yeah. So we just aimed those directly at that chimney camera, and the recording goes off. We realized because the light goes off once we turn the floodlight off. See how it's off, but it'll come back on once the light is off. And we just turn it back on.
We put up walls to try to get from looking in our backyard. That didn't work. He moved the camera, as you can see. He moved it. So, which tells you right now that it's not for surveillance. It's for surveilling my backyard and my privacy. So, he gets mad. He has something against Black Lives Matter. So, I put up a sign. And
I am back after recording this video to add this in because I realized I did not explain what the clip said. And a lot of it was just subtitles. So, somebody who is visually impaired is not going to actually be able to see that. So basically, this clip begins and it says that the neighbors are racist and they have cameras pointing into their parents' backyard, whoever posted this video, right? So they responded by making these boards that they decorated. So it's cute from the backyard, right? It's like a cute decoration. It has lights on it in a decorative pattern. And, it has fake grass on it and stuff. So it's very cute. It lights up at night and it blocks the neighbor's cameras. But then the neighbor went and moved their cameras high up so that they could still see into the Black people's backyard. So that's pretty much the gist of the parts that do not have narration. Now, this is my thing. And you know what my problem is? I try to make sense out of the senseless because this simply does not make any sense, right? If you are racist, okay, and you truly believe that Black people are dangerous, okay, well, the logical thing to do, I think, would be to point cameras at your house, right? Because you're what if these people break into my house or something, right? But when you're pointing cameras into their yard, it's that's not even about your safety anymore. That's just about surveillance, right? And something I've mentioned in previous YouTube videos is a lot of white people still have this overseer mentality, okay? Now, y'all know I always talk about epigenetics and how it affects Black Americans to this day, but Chile, it affects white Americans too. So let's get into it. Before I get into this discussion, let me be clear. I said that it affects white Americans as well, and that is not true. It affects all white people, okay? A lot of times, white Europeans like to use white Americans as a scapegoat and pretend that white Americans are racist, and they are not. And that is not true. The same way that white Americans are affected epigenetically due to what their ancestors did, y'all are too, okay? Your ancestors was colonizing, conquering, and all types of stuff, and that has an effect on you. So white Europeans, please do not come to this post playing dumb, because we gonna really get to playing stupid up in here, okay? So now let's get into what epigenetics actually is. And for people who have watched my videos before, you can go ahead. You can fast forward if you so choose, because I say the same thing every time I discuss it, right? But every person has a genome, and your genome is just the instruction manual that makes you you, right? There are genes for your skin color, your hair texture, whatever, right? Now, let's think of the instruction manual as like a recipe book. Let's say I have a recipe book and there is a pizza recipe on page 1. There is a salad recipe on page 2, whatever, okay? Now, a genetic mutation would mean that I actually changed my genome. It would mean that I actually changed this recipe in some way. So, for example, say my pizza recipe initially said, oh, we're going to use a can of tomato sauce to make the pizza sauce, whatever, right? If I change that recipe, it would be, oh, well, instead of a can, we're going to use a can and a half, or maybe a half a can, right? So a genetic mutation, again, would mean that I actually changed that instruction manual, okay? An epigenetic change, though, does not change the instruction manual. Instead, it changes how the instruction manual is read, right? So, again, we have this genome, and instead of changing the pizza recipe, for example, we say, oh, we're just going to make extra pizzas right now because we're having, a dinner party, or we're watching a football game, inviting folks over, and we're going to make a lot of pizzas to feed everyone, right? So we did not change the pizza recipe. We just said, right now, let's focus on making more pizzas. That is an epigenetic change, okay? Now, this is the thing. Scientists have done a lot of research, and they have found that epigenetic changes can actually be passed down throughout generations. Let me make it clear. Passing down epigenetic coping mechanisms is not unique to transatlantic slavery. Let me make that very clear first, because a lot of you all are going to brush it off because y'all love to brush off anything that only applies to Black people, right? For example, off the top of my head, there is a group of Indian people. I forget what specific group this is, but they have a hard time losing weight to this day in 2025 because their ancestors 100 plus years ago were starved at the hands of the British, right? So their ancestors were constantly going through famines, and of course their ancestors' bodies reacted by holding weight on because these people were in danger of starving to death. They didn't know when they get their next meal, right? And those epigenetic changes have been passed down throughout the generations. So today in 2025, even though these people are not being starved, they still have trouble losing weight because of the famines that their ancestors endured, right? Epigenetic transgenerational trauma, that's what they call it, transgenerational, like it transcends generations, right? It's seen in so many different things, right? It's seen in prisoner of war victims. It's seen in sexual assault victims. It's seen in people who have lived through wars and stuff, right? All types of scenarios. So now let's get into transatlantic slavery, right? Think about how traumatic slavery was. Think about what you know about it, and then reckon with the fact that what we know about it is not even a drop in the bucket, right? A lot of stuff was covered up, erased, etc., 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 right? Think about how traumatic slavery was, okay? And I'm literally about to tear up already, y'all, right? But just think about just anything off the top of your head. Like, imagine being a mother, you have a baby, and your baby is ripped out your arms and sold to somebody, and you never see your child again. Can you imagine how traumatic that is? Sit here and think about the life of one Black American person, right? Just one Black American person and the things they may have experienced and they may have seen, right? They themselves may have been sold away from their family, or maybe their family members were, right? They were probably beaten a number of times throughout their lives, whipped. They probably saw a lot of other people being whipped. They probably experienced lynchings and white mobs burning down Black town, all types of crazy stuff, right? And this happened for hundreds of years. You are right now putting yourself in the footsteps of one Black American person, right? Multiply that by all of the Black Americans that there were over generation after generation after generation. That is a lot of trauma, right? Now, you all are probably like, Flower Tower, you kind of off track. But no, I'm getting to where I'm going, right? Something I've noticed whenever you see anything about transgenerational trauma is that only the victims are ever studied, right? So in the case of the Indian people who were starved, right? They studied the descendants of the victims. Oh, the victims have, these epigenetic markers that make it harder to lose weight, so and so and so. They don't study the descendants of the British who starved them, right? In the case of prisoner of war victims, right? They study the people who were the prisoners of war. They don't study the people who were traumatizing those people, and tormenting and torturing them, right? In the case of transatlantic slavery, they study Black Americans and they say, oh, to this day, Black Americans have all these upregulated stress response, and this is how it negatively impacts their health and so and so and so, right? But they don't study the epigenetic changes that are present in white Americans, right? This is my thing. As a Black American, you're telling me that my ancestors were so traumatized at the hands of white people that they passed all of this, this trauma down to me. But those white people who were so full of hatred and rage and aggression and violence, they didn't pass anything down to their descendants. That's what you're telling me? That's not really believable, right? Now, a lot of white Americans are going to use a cop-out. They're going to say, oh, well, my Meemaw came here through Ellis Island, my dog diggity, you know, through the Statue of Liberty. First of all, the Statue of Liberty does not have anything to do with immigrants. It's kind of crazy that y'all kind of just hijacked the whole shebang, the whole shebitty. The Statue of Liberty was actually sent to us by France to commemorate the end of slavery. That's why she is breaking the chains. Come on, like, what we talking about? But whatever, that's besides the point, right? A lot of white Americans are going to use this as their cop-out, right? But I mentioned something in the beginning of this video. I think I did, at least. If I didn't, I meant to, okay? This in no way stopped after slavery. We're not even talking about the generations and generations of Jim Crow and all this other stuff, right? So no matter who you are, no matter what point your Meemaw and Peepaw immigrated here, guess what? They were playing a role in this. That is the reality, right? And that's not me attempting to shame you or anything. I don't get why white people are so defensive, but actually I do. I was going to say I don't get why white people are so defensive because, like, if you told me that my great-great-grandmama or granddaddy did something, I'd be like, dang, that's messed up. Like, I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I didn't do that, right? But the reason that a lot of white people feel so defensive when you bring something like this up is because they understand epigenetics the same way that black people do, right? Something I said before I even learned about epigenetics, right? I think I hadn't even gone to college to get my bachelor's of science in biochem yet, right? Something I said is that sometimes I feel like I have 400 years worth of tired weighing on me, right? That was long before I knew anything about epigenetics or maybe even before these studies were out, right? But I felt the weight of my ancestors on me, right? If I can feel that, you telling me that white people can't feel the weight of all that hatred and aggression and rage and violence of their ancestors on them? That's what you're telling me? Again, I just don't believe that. If I can feel the tired and the hurt and the frustration and the pain of my ancestors, you telling me that white people can't feel nothing from their ancestors? Again, that's just not believable, right? And maybe they don't have the words for it. Maybe they don't know what epigenetics is, or maybe they haven't vocalized it in the way that I did before I knew what it was, right? But I know that they feel that, and that's why they feel so defensive. That's why they feel so defensive. A lot of people like to sit around and say, we are not our ancestors, but actually we are. You are way more connected with your ancestors than you would believe, right? And that's not even me coming from any sort of spiritual standpoint or anything. I am not religious. I am not spiritual. I will not sit here and say, like, the spirits are watching me right now. No, that's not even the standpoint I'm coming from. Even if you don't believe that, the science backs it. Your ancestors are in your DNA, determining what your epigenetics are saying and how you're reacting to a situation and whatever, right? Even if you are not religious, even if you are not spiritual, the fact is that what your ancestors went through, what your ancestors did, have a direct effect on you. That is the reality. It don't matter how you motherfucking feel about it, because somebody's about to be like, oh, G Willikers, I feel that you just want to be a victim. You can feel like scratching the crack of your ass. Don't nobody particularly care. That is the facts. That is reality. That is why a lot of people feel so defensive when you bring up what their ancestors did, because they know good and well they're just like their ancestors, even if they don't say it aloud, right? So that gets me back to my point with this neighbor with the cameras, right? This is very clearly overseer behavior. A lot of white people, they have not reckoned with the fact that black people are free, and they still have, again, this overseer mentality. For hundreds of years, these people were watching over us and in charge of us. Oh, show me your papers. What you doing? So and so and so. And you think that just went away overnight? Clearly it didn't. Now, again, I do myself a disservice by attempting to make sense of the senseless, right? Because if this neighbor really thinks that his black neighbors are up to something or violent or suspicious or whatever, right, then he's going to point the cameras to his house because he wants to make sure that he has proof of somebody breaking in or whatever, right? He's not going to point the cameras to their house, right? Why would he be pointing the cameras to their backyard? Like, imagine what you do in the backyard. I don't even have a backyard. Okay, I have a balcony, but I go on my balcony, you know, I sip a drink or whatever, just chill, look at the sunset, right? Like, why would you be watching me do that? That's weird, right? But again, that's that overseer mentality. It's odd. And you know, I really do think, no, I know for a fact that racist people have a very sick obsession with black people. Because if it was simply about, oh, I don't like you, get away from me, then they wouldn't act the way that they act. Why do you have cameras pointing to my yard? Like, what are we talking about? This is odd. This is not normal, you know, and people like to pretend that racism is just, oh, I don't like you. But it's so much deeper than that. It's so much weirder than that. It really is.